Second month of the Cold War with my boyfriend. He brought an incredibly stunning girl to the party. Someone teased, "Fabian, this is more like your taste. By the way, what did you ever see in Regina?" Fabian gave a lazy smile. "Never dated an ordinary girl before. Thought I'd give it a try." I stood outside the door. Didn't cry. Didn't make a scene. Nor did I go in to confront him. I just knew very clearly that this was the end for Fabian and me. Chapter 1. Fabian hasn't contacted me in a month. Actually, over the past 6 months, I've noticed him becoming distant. But whenever he stayed over, he clung to me all night long. I felt a little lost, remembering our last time together a month ago. That night, Fabian had a few drinks. I wore the new nightdress my best friend gave me. When I walked out of the bathroom, Fabian's gaze changed. It was as if we were back in the early days of our relationship. A little wild. By the end of the night, I almost thought I might die in bed. But after he left the next day, he stopped answering my calls and texts. I'm a very passive person. When Fabian ignored me, I tried reaching out a few times but quickly stopped making a fool of myself, until several classmates started hinting at something, asking if Fabian and I had a fight. They had seen Fabian with different girls on several occasions, each one beautiful, with amazing figures. Fabian seemed pretty close with them. I couldn't help but walk to the mirror, and then I saw the plain, ordinary me. I've been an unremarkable girl since I was little. Growing up didn't change that. I remained average. It made sense that Fabian would tire of me, but I wanted to try one more time, to fight for us. After all, I truly liked Fabian, long before he even knew I existed. I had already been secretly in love with him for a long time. I pulled out all my dresses and tried them on. In the end, I boldly chose the burgundy slip dress. I carefully curled my hair and put on light makeup. Tonight, a friend was having a birthday party. Fabian would be there. I missed him. I wanted to see him, to take him home. Chapter 2. The birthday party was quite grand. I didn't come with Fabian, so it took me a bit of time to find my way in. By the time the waiter led me in, the atmosphere was already lively. The room was full of elegance and glamour. Even though I had gone through the effort of dressing up, I still blended into the background. So, no one noticed me as I arrived amidst the lively crowd. All eyes were on Fabian and the stunning girl beside him. I had never seen a girl so beautiful. Looking at her, I couldn't even muster a shred of jealousy. She was just standing there in a simple black dress, her long hair down. She wore a pair of pearl earrings, her face nearly bare. She stood confidently next to Fabian, the two of them a perfect match, looking like they belonged together. Friends couldn't resist teasing him. "Fabian, aren't you going to introduce her to us?" With a beauty like this, even last year's Miss Hong Kong would pale in comparison. "Yeah, this is more your taste. By the way, what did you ever see in Regina?" At the mention of my name, the crowd finally seemed to remember that Fabian had a girlfriend, me. The mood suddenly became awkward, but Fabian broke the silence. "Why is everyone so quiet?" "Haha, we're just curious. Really, after all, when you started dating Regina, it really surprised us." Fabian gave a casual smile. "What? Never dated an ordinary girl before. Thought I'd give it a try." "Of course, she's a bit too ordinary." Everyone burst into laughter again. I stood in the back, unnoticed in the corner, watching as Fabian and that girl were surrounded like the stars around the moon. 2 years had passed, and yet it felt like I was right back where I started. Fabian was always the center of attention, perched at the top of the social pyramid, and I, always the ordinary girl, blending into the crowd. Chapter 3. I didn't go over to make a fool of myself, but I didn't cry either. The sadness was so heavy, it numbed me. Yet, when I saw Fabian shielding that girl from drinks, standing protectively in front of her, a sudden sharp pain pierced my heart, like a needle stabbing through, drawing blood. Back then, countless beautiful girls were chasing after Fabian, but he chose me, and he genuinely settled down. It shocked a lot of people. I used to foolishly think I was like the lucky Cinderella in those cheesy romance novels, the one who tamed the wild prince. But now I've completely woken up. I knew in my heart, This was the end for Fabian and me. On the way back, I got a message from Fabian. Why didn't you come tonight? Wasn't feeling well, so I didn't go. Fabian didn't reply. I put my phone back in my bag, watching the fleeting night scenes outside the car window. And somehow, I suddenly remembered the night we made things official. Fabian cornered me in an empty hallway. I was nervous, panicked, and confused. Yet there was a hidden joy and anticipation. Regina. I didn't expect him to know my name. When he said it, I instinctively looked up at him. The summer night breeze was cool, but sweat kept dripping down my back, and my palms were sticky and damp. I've been noticing you for a long time. I've always thought you were adorable. Fabian walked up to me, smiling. Do you want to be my girlfriend, Regina? Suddenly, I closed my eyes, sitting in the speeding cab, in the bright yet dark night of this bustling city. I let the tears silently fall down my face. Chapter 4. After a few drinks, Fabian's head felt a little dizzy, so he put down his glass and got up to go to the balcony. He took out a cigarette and had just lit it when a friend walked over. Someone just said they think they saw Regina. The cigarette in Fabian's hand paused slightly. When? His friend glanced at him and lowered his voice. I think it was when they were joking about how you ended up with Regina back then. Suddenly, the cigarette tasted different to Fabian. He stubbed out half of it in the ashtray. The rolled-up sleeves of his shirt had a faint jasmine scent. At home, Regina liked to put her grandmother's homemade jasmine sachets in the closet. For some reason, Fabian thought of the jasmine tea Regina would make him whenever he was drunk. Everything Regina liked was just like her. A little bland, easy to grow tired of over time. Yet somehow, the scent lingered, catching you off guard when you least expected it. Do you think Regina will be mad? His friend asked, a bit concerned. Fabian, however, was sure, no, even if she is, she's easy to appease. So what do you really want, Regina or Miss Lynn? His friend asked. Fabian lit another cigarette. When he finished that one, he finally raised an eyebrow and smiled. Can't I have both? His friend seemed surprised. You're not planning on breaking up with Regina? Fabian shot him a glance. Why should I? Regina was so obedient, so easy to deal with, even though he was tired of her now. Breaking up wasn't on his mind, but right now, Fabian didn't feel like comforting her. Regina would end up comforting herself anyway. Chapter 5. After that night, it was as if Fabian had completely disappeared from my world. I stayed at my best friend's place for a few days. After I had somewhat calmed down, I returned to my place near the school and packed up my things. Before leaving, I carefully checked to make sure I hadn't left anything behind, and then I locked the door and left. I had applied for an exchange program at a university in the South. It was for 2 years. I would be leaving in a week. Once, I saw Fabian's car from afar, near the school. That same beautiful girl from that night got out of the car with him. They went to a street vendor and bought some food. It was a late spring afternoon, around 4 o'clock. The sunlight filtered lazily through the leaves. The students and couples passing by all had youthful, radiant faces. I stood under the camphor tree, holding a stack of books, dressed in the most ordinary sweatshirt and jeans, watching the person I once loved so easily fall for someone else. How could I not feel sad? But the spring sun was beautiful. I was still young. It felt like there wasn't much I couldn't bounce back from. Chapter 6. A little over 2 weeks after I arrived in the South, Fabian called me for the first time. I was just leaving the library with my arms full of books when I heard his voice in my ear. A voice that suddenly felt so unfamiliar. Regina, are you in your dorm? Or where are you? How about I come pick you up? I stayed silent for a moment before I finally responded. I'm not in the dorm. I'm not in Hong Kong either. Where did you go, Regina? I applied for an exchange program. I left a week ago. Why didn't you tell me? Why didn't you talk to me about it? Fabian's voice suddenly rose. Fabian, I've been waiting for your call all this time, and now that it's here, I can finally say it. Regina. Fabian's voice was urgent, as if he had more to say, but I cut him off. You were the one who asked to start this relationship. So now, I'm the one ending it. Fabian, let's break up. And please, Don't call me or try to contact me again, Regina." Before he could say more, I hung up. Fabian called back almost immediately. I didn't answer. Once the ringing stopped, I deleted and blocked all his contact information. At that moment, I felt a strange sadness, but even more than that, I felt a deep sense of relief. Chapter 7. Fabian yanked off his tie and tossed it aside. Maybe it was the burn of alcohol making him irritable, or maybe it was the fact that the usually obedient Regina had silently walked away and declared their breakup. That had caught him off guard. But Fabian was never one to brood. Born with a silver spoon in his mouth, Fabian had always gotten what he wanted. There had never been anything or anyone that he couldn't have. Regina was the only girlfriend he had publicly acknowledged. Unlike other women, she was different, and as long as he didn't say it was over, then Regina would never be able to leave. Fabian picked up his phone and dialed a number. "You've been in the South recently, right? There's something I need your help with." "Yeah, don't hurt her. I'm not doing this to get back at her." He just wanted Regina to understand that only he, Fabian, could protect her. Only by staying by his side could she live freely, without fear. Chapter 8. Just as my shift at the tea shop was ending, Anna, one of the employees, called to me in a low voice. "Regina, look, that car's here again." I glanced up and immediately spotted the Rolls-Royce parked across the street. The license plate looked somewhat familiar. I frowned slightly, almost cutting my finger with the fruit knife. "Regina, is he here for you?" I sighed and shook my head. "Do you really think that's possible?" Anna looked at me and giggled. Since moving to the South, I realized there were even more beautiful women here than I had ever seen. A plain girl like me was just a drop in the ocean, incapable of making even the smallest ripple. That car had been parked outside the shop for an entire week. While the license plate seemed familiar, I hadn't connected it to myself. After my shift ended, I changed into my clothes, grabbed my bag, and left. As I walked past the Rolls-Royce, I hurried by, just like I had the past few days, not sparing it a second glance. But this time, the car door suddenly opened as I walked by. Startled, I instinctively stepped back to avoid it. But the man who stepped out had already called my name. "Are you Miss Regina?" "And you are?" "No need to be nervous, miss. Our Zhao would like to meet with you." "Zhao? I don't know any Zhao." The window of the back seat slowly lowered halfway. In the dim light, I saw Joseph sitting inside. We didn't really know each other well. It was only through Fabian that I occasionally saw him at gatherings. We barely spoke, never really interacted. Fabian's circle was full of wealthy playboys. They were notorious for their wild antics and the constant parade of women. Joseph would sometimes join them for sports or poker games, but I never saw him bring any women along. I even once commented to Fabian how Joseph seemed like someone who kept to himself. At the time, Fabian had gotten jealous, pulling me close. "And what about me? You're saying I'm not keeping to myself, Regina? Ever since I started dating you, I'm practically the perfect boyfriend. And now you're talking about other men? Besides, how many times have you even seen Joseph? Do you know what he's like behind the scenes?" The Zhao family runs both sides of the law in the South. When he was playing with guns and women, you were still in elementary school. Let me warn you, stay away from him. He's ruthless, and he never forgets a slight. If you ever get on his bad side, even I won't be able to protect you. Fabian's words had definitely scared me. After that, I consciously avoided Joseph. We would occasionally exchange a word or two, but eventually, I'd go out of my way to avoid him entirely. And over time, Joseph just stopped showing up altogether. I hadn't seen him in over 6 months. Not until now. And I certainly hadn't expected him to come looking for me. "Regina," Joseph spoke, his deep voice calling my name. The streetlight outside the car was bright, its glow filtering through the branches of the camphor tree. The light flickered and swayed, casting shifting shadows over Joseph's sharp, defined features. He was dressed in a suit, a lit cigarette held between his fingers. Smoke curled softly around his face. It had been so long since I'd seen him that I suddenly found him unfamiliar. Maybe it was the rumors about him that lingered in my mind. A strange sense of fear and unease stirred inside me. "Zhao," What do you need from me? I asked, my voice a little shaky. Joseph seemed to smile slightly, his gaze falling slowly onto my face. Regina, have you offended someone? Because people in the South have been called in to invite you for tea. Chapter 9. I was stunned by what I heard, and after the shock, an overwhelming wave of fear swept over me. Joseph had said it politely, but I understood the implication very clearly. He wasn't just inviting me for tea, this was kidnapping. But I had only been in the South for 2 weeks. I hadn't offended anyone. Still, Joseph wouldn't tell me this for no reason. The more I thought about it, the more scared I became. Without realizing it, tears began to stream down my face. I didn't offend anyone. Zhao, there must be some kind of misunderstanding, right? Whether it's a misunderstanding or not, I don't know, he said flatly. But when someone takes money, they do what they're paid to do. That's how it works. Zhao. I wanted to ask for his help, but I didn't know how. After all, I barely knew Joseph. He and Fabian were on good terms, but Fabian and I had already broken up. Regina, I'm only telling you this because we know each other. Be careful for the next while. Don't go anywhere alone. With that, Joseph motioned for his driver to get in the car. Just then, I noticed a few unfamiliar and rough-looking men standing under a tree not far away. They had been watching me the whole time. As Joseph's driver got into the car, those men snuffed out their cigarettes and started walking toward me. A chill ran down my spine, cold sweat soaking through my back. My survival instinct kicked in, and I instinctively ran toward Joseph's car. Just as the car was about to start, I grabbed onto the window, which hadn't yet fully rolled up. Joseph. Bad people are after me. I'm scared. Can you let me in, please? My voice trembled with fear, tears rolling uncontrollably down my face. Joseph sat there, expressionless. Fabian had always said that Joseph was cold-hearted, ruthless, and never forgot a grudge. I had no real connection with him. Why would he help me? The fact that he came to warn me tonight was already more than I could ask for. I lowered my wet eyelashes and slowly loosened my grip. But then Joseph spoke. Get in. Chapter 10. I stared in shock, wide-eyed. Joseph. The door opened and then closed again as the car sped forward into traffic. In the rearview mirror, I saw those men chase after us for a few steps before stopping, unwilling to give up. One of them even seemed to be holding a knife. A wave of fear washed over me. Joseph. Thank you so much for earlier. I expressed my gratitude seriously. Joseph had been staring straight ahead, but now his gaze shifted slowly to my face. Regina, what are you going to do next time? I froze. He was right. I couldn't just stay inside forever. Next time, I might not be so lucky. Even if I called the police, they couldn't be there every time. And by the way, I don't accept simple thank yous as payment. The divider between the front and back of the car suddenly lowered. The large vehicle instantly felt split in two. Now, in the private space of the back seat, it was just me and Joseph. The smell of smoke on him was strong, and there was a faint scar at the end of his brow. Even sitting there calmly, his presence was imposing, completely different from the easygoing type of Fabian. I instinctively shrank back, trying to create some distance between us, but Joseph had already reached out and grabbed my arm. Regina. I'm not some kind-hearted fool who helps people for no reason. His grip tightened slightly, pulling me forward. I tried to pull away, but his grip only grew stronger. With the slight jolt of the car, my nose nearly brushed against his chin. Fear, panic, and helplessness flooded my senses. This was the South. This was Joseph's territory. He had connections in both the underworld and with the authorities. I feared pain. I feared death. I was just an ordinary student from an ordinary family. I wasn't the kind of person who could maintain her pride in such a situation, willing to die before compromising. Joseph, you saved me this time. I'll repay you. I tried to pull my body back, avoiding any more contact. Really, I'm not just saying thanks. I'll do everything I can to repay you. Regina, I don't need people trying to repay me. Then what do you need? I need a woman. With a strong tug, Joseph pulled me directly into his arms. My nose hit his firm chest, the pain bringing tears to my eyes instantly. Joseph gripped my chin, wiping away the tears at the corners of my eyes. Regina, remember this. I only take care of my own woman's problems. Other people's lives and deaths have nothing to do with me. The meaning in his words was clear. If this happened again, and I got chased down and killed in the street, he wouldn't even glance at me. Instinctively, I glanced up at Joseph again. At this close range, the scar on his brow seemed even more menacing and terrifying. I was caught between a rock and a hard place, completely at a loss. The car stopped in front of Joseph's massive mansion. He ordered the maid to take me to rest in one of the guest rooms. Think it over tonight. Give me your answer tomorrow. Can I go back to school? You can, but if anything happens, I won't help again. With that, Joseph turned and walked away. I shut my mouth and stood there for a moment before obediently following the maid to the guest room. Chapter 11. Joseph stood in the garden, smoking for a while. Only when Regina's figure disappeared from sight did he look away. His phone had been ringing for quite some time. Fabian was calling. Joseph smirked and called him back. Fabian answered quickly. Brother 4. How did things go? Just as you expected. Did she freak out? Joseph thought back to Regina standing outside the car, her face pale with fear, tears streaming down her cheeks. A strange softness crept into his heart. Yeah, she was really scared. Cried quite a bit. I knew it. She's always been so timid. The mockery in Joseph's eyes deepened. When are you coming to the south? I'll wait a little longer. When she's really terrified and comes begging me for help. Brother 4. Please make sure your men just scare her. Don't let her get hurt. Got it. Joseph hung up the phone, smoked a few more cigarettes, and then headed towards the main building where Regina was staying. The guest room on the second floor was already dark and quiet. Joseph stopped a maid and asked, Did the young lady say anything earlier? The maid shook her head. She didn't say much, but it seemed like she cried again. She just fell asleep. Joseph nodded and added, Prepare a Chinese breakfast tomorrow. She prefers that. Yes, sir. Joseph went upstairs and stood outside the guest room for a while. He seemed to be thinking about something, and a faint smile crossed his face. After a few minutes, he turned and went to his own room. Chapter 12.